to Yorb's next webinar. Carrying on from our co-pilot journey, we're going to discuss data governance and the importance of it. Now, during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those, and we'll have time for questions at the end as well. So with me today, I've got Daniel Goymer, CEO, and Heather Todd, Head of Professional Services. You'll all be aware of this journey into AI and what a technology change has happened over a very short time. So I guess for me, I've got a couple of questions. So firstly, how do we balance this constant change of technology with the need for reliability and security?
Rich, I think it's a really good question, because I think over the last 20, 30 years, as IT's evolved and changed, we've become known as the industry of no, or the department of no, as the case may be these days. Our jobs are to keep systems running, downtime costs money, productivity drops. And certainly you get these please explain letters from the boss saying, why was our systems down? It cost me $10,000 an hour. And that's become a real problem for us, because we want to be there as a partner for your business and not somebody to stop you making progress, but sometimes we're seen as the stopper of this progress. But it can't be denied that security is really important. It's a really important issue these days, and the likes of Copilot and these other AI tools are going to exaggerate and make that a bigger issue than it has been in the past. So as much as we want to make sure people are using this technology and moving forwards, we've also got to be aware what are the risks associated with that, and what risks are we willing to resolve, and what risks are we willing to accept. So that's really the aim of today, is understanding what are the risks of turning on all the floodgates of AI, and how do we mitigate those risks in a way that means that we don't have people going underground and doing shadow IT.
So we keep hearing the term data governance being bandied around, but what does that actually mean?
So data governance is the practice of managing your data. So it's everything you do to keep your data secure, to keep it private, accurate, available, and usable. So it includes everything from the actions people take, your policies, your processes, and the technology that supports them through that entire data lifecycle, whether it's from the creation of data, storage of it, or its use, or finally its deletion at the end.
Thanks, Heather. But why do we actually need it?
Well, to start with, you often hear data governance alongside Copilot and AI, but it's not actually a Copilot or AI issue. Data governance is important whether or not you roll out AI or not. So from a legislation perspective, you've got different legislations that are out there, whether it's the Privacy Act, the anti-money laundering, or whatever other legislation there is. And it introduces you to risk if you're not taking care of your data. So
the Anti-Money Laundering Act is one that I think is set up to make us all fail, because the AML says, please verify who you're dealing with. It says, please get a copy of their driver's license, their passport, identify they exist and you're not funding terrorism or anything else. The problem with that is now we've got these driver's licenses and these passports, we copy them, we scan them, we put them on our online systems. So AML is the legislation I love to hate, because it just creates an issue that we'd rather not have.
There's some decent fines involved.
And the Privacy Act fines, there's talk of $250,000 fines. There hasn't been any big cases of that yet, but at some point, once this has been around a few years, the Privacy Commission is going to try and make an example out of one or two people for not listening to that.
Excellent. So how do we actually start?
Well, there's a term that has come up recently called data rot. So it stands for redundant, obsolete, and trivial. And that's something, another of the whys really. You've got to make sure we start to look at that as well. Because if we start using these AI tools and we start questioning things, so one of the ones I love is, we've all been generating data for 10, 20, 30 years now. We've got systems with files and policies back from 2000 and 1999. I know I don't delete anything. Sorry, just one moment. Chris, can you still hear us all right? We may just have a technical issue here. Please hold.
Daryl.
Okay.
Sorry, Lyle, it's just you. So carrying on. So the issue I love to talk about is the fact that we have these policies we created 20, 30 years ago, and we leave them in the system. We can delete nothing. So if I ask the system, hey, tell me what health and safety policies exist in 2024, I've got a policy from 2002, from 2006, from 2010. Do I need to wear steel cap boots? Well, in 2002 I didn't, but in 2024 I did. So if you don't address some of this old data in your system, how you're going to get over AI is really difficult, and you're going to get the wrong information. And on top of that as well, we talked about the sensitive data. So do you have sensitive data in place? So we talked about passports, we talked about driver's licenses, but also pay records, performance management, health information. When you're using Copilot or any other tool, and you ask it, what performance issues has Rich been under lately, is it going to tell me? And if it does tell me, should I have that information? I think a really, really clear point here, and this is where we want to talk about data governance, separated from Copilot and data and AI tools, is that these issues existed prior to AI tools. The data rot was there. The sensitive data was there. If I had access to it 2 years ago, Copilot has access to it now. None of that's changed. It just makes it that much easier. Makes it so much easier to amplify and access the data than we had in the past. So I lost my window there. So where do you start? You mentioned before, sorry, I went off on a tangent. The really important thing, the start point for me, is making sure you take all reasonable steps. It's a little bit like health and safety policies. We want to use our data to succeed. We want to use our data to do our jobs better. I know at Yorb we spend a whole lot of time on data these days and making sure we get robust data that we can make really intelligent business decisions on. So some of those business decisions for us around monthly forecasting, trend analysis on tickets. And if we're not recording our data correctly, there's no value in that. And it's the same for your AI tools. If you're not putting that data in there correctly, there's no value, in which case, being a tidy Kiwi, as I say it, making sure your data is put in a good state before you start is going to immensely increase the value you get out of these tools.
It must also help with your team to be more productive because they can get to the data cleanly, easily, quickly as well. So that's definitely a bonus. So do you have a plan, a roadmap, some sort of strategy to make this easy for others to follow?
There are so many different ways of approaching data governance, but we found like there are 6 key steps to it, and you do have to structure it. So this is our logical approach, and the first one is to your data assessment, your policies and governance, data restructure, and then data leak prevention and information rights management. Onto your data lifecycle management and your taxonomy and meta tags. So each of these steps you can do individually. You don't need to try and figure out how to get everything done at once, but you should plan for it and structure it. So you're looking at whether you do this in the first month, whether you do this in the first 6 months, whatever it might be. Unless you've got that longer term plan, you're probably never going to get to 3, 4, 5, 6 because it's just easy to keep doing things slowly. So it is making that plan and going along the journey and bringing your team alongside you on it.
Excellent. So we'll start with the first, assessing your data. Sounds like a big job.
Yep. And we always recommend that you start with this because it's figuring out where you are now. So there's no point figuring out where you want to be and what you have to do and all of this if you don't really understand where you're currently sitting. So it's having a look at where you are. Do you know what data you've currently got stored? Is it your payroll data, your employment records, your financial records, whatever it might be, driver's license, AML data, and where are you storing it? Do you have things on your local file servers, on your SharePoint? Do you have it in Dropbox and external systems, on USB drives, if you still have that floating around, disks maybe? Where are you storing the sensitive data? And then what protection do you currently have in place? So I know Daniel was saying that we've reviewed our data and it was making sure that we're looking at where driver's license is stored.
Well, one of the funny things I found when we did ours was we had an insurance requirement that said, please make sure every single person that drives a Yorb vehicle is allowed to drive a vehicle. And so do they have a valid driver's license? Now our team took that to mean we must take a photocopy of the driver's license. So every time your employee started, we took a copy of the driver's license and put it on our system. And it wasn't until 5 or 6 years later I asked, do we actually need this? We went back to the insurance company and they said, no, you don't need that. You just need to have sight of it. So now we just record that yes, they have a driver's license. What's the expiry date? But the interpretation early on was we must have that data and we must store it. So you don't know what other people in your business are storing data that maybe you should be, or maybe you could get away with not storing.
I think you raise a good point as well, in that often when we think about our data, we probably think about files and folders and so on, but your data is in a lot of different systems. So actually uncovering that and having a look at it.
There's a lot of silos. With cloud these days, you have Dropbox, you have Google Drive, you have, as you said, USB drives. They were a fantastic tool for years. And the problem is, the more controls you put around this data, potentially the more ways people find to work around that. We found that people weren't using SharePoint because it was too hard to share from SharePoint, so they would move to Dropbox so they could do their sharing. And so, hang on, we want to prevent sharing for a reason. So having that holistic, where is our data, what are the stores we can put our data into before you begin is really important. And then being aware that the more controls you put in place, the more you may create a shadow IT issue.
So once you've assessed it, you've taken that snapshot of where you are now, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is to figure out where you're actually going. So this is policies and governance, and I love this area, but I know I'm strange because I love this area. So this is figuring out what you want your company and your data to look like. So do you have policies in place for handling your data? So what's the acceptable use of it? Who should have access to it? So you've assessed where you're at, knowing whether it's right or wrong. So it might be everything's stored in SharePoint, but is that what you want? It might be that everything's locked down, but is that what you want? So it's figuring out what your acceptable use standards are, where you store the data, who it can be shared with, and making sure your team understands it. Because if they understand it, it's easier for them to follow the rules, to follow the processes. If they don't understand what's expected of them, they don't know what to do, or they're going to find ways around it because they don't understand it. So it's getting that structure in place. So
Absolutely, yeah. That point around getting the logical state, I think, is great, because then people get it. They don't have to relearn so much and move on. So excellent. And what next?
So some people have this really well now, other people don't. But there's whole ways you can structure your data. And the rule, I know it was at Vodafone, you said, keep it simple, stupid, I think might be clear. So we might be going back a hell of a long way. Keeping it simple is really, really, really important, because it comes back to complications drive inefficiencies, it drives people not following process, drives a whole lot of problems. So first of all, make sure you understand what data you've got now, you understand what good looks like. Now make sure you put your data in a place where that works. So if you've got sensitive information, put that data into a location where only certain people can see it. Consider each of your data sources. Make sure you pop each data source in the appropriate location for that, and it's shared with the appropriate people. So some systems may require additional controls. So, Rich and I, we've been arguing about this recently about how should I use a shared data? What's the appropriate way? Is it okay to share data? And yes, it is okay to share data, but there are situations where it's not, and put the correct systems and processes in place to stop it when they shouldn't. So if there's a human resources drive, make sure you prevent sharing of files from the human resources drive, because you don't want to share that performance data outside the business. So put a logical plan in place. Take it one step at a time. Really a good company, how to eat an elephant. You eat it one bite at a time. This can look bigger than being hurt. It's not. You just break into what's that first set of data, work on that. Then do our second set, then do our third set. And it might take you 3, 6, 12 months. You just work through it one silo at a time. On top of that, make sure you bring your people along on that journey. Because if they're not on board, they're going to find ways of working around it. And if you put all these controls in place, they're going to say, it's too hard, I'm going to put it on my desktop. And then they say on the desktop, it's not backed up. And then they can't share it. Then you have all this data, you don't know where it is, then that person leaves, and suddenly all their data is lost. It's like, make sure you put a system in place which is accessible to people, simple, and people can work through.
Great. So, so now that you've sorted that out, it's in its logical state. What's next?
So next step for me is make sure you secure that data. So there's the initial security we talked about, having libraries and putting some simple controls around those libraries. But then there's some tools called data leak prevention and information rights management. These tools are built into 365 now, so they're not things you need to invest more money in. They're tools that are already there. Because they do two differing but similar tasks. So data leak prevention is all about preventing accidental sharing of data outside the business. So data leak prevention will say, show me all documents in the system that are a New Zealand driver's license number, or an IRD number, or a bank account number. And if you try and email that or share that out via some sort of sharing link, data leak prevention will prevent it and say, no, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that. Now I say that's accidental data loss because if somebody's maliciously doing it, they'll put a USB key in their computer and copy it that way, or they'll take a photo or a screenshot. They'll find ways around it. But we've all heard stories around ACC and other companies over the years accidentally sharing a whole lot of case files to a recipient they shouldn't have it. Data leak prevention is designed to prevent that. And it's actually a fairly easy thing to turn on. You just say, all those New Zealand driver's license follows a standard. IRD follows a standard. Bank account number follows a standard. Passport follows a standard. The systems are really good at detecting that and just highlighting, flagging, and preventing that sharing. So that's stage one, data leak prevention. Second one is information rights management, and this is about tagging sensitive data at point of save. So again, you keep it simple, so you can create a tagging structure as complicated as you like, but simple is good. So first of all, the things I like are three. Public. Tag files as public. So a public file doesn't mean you're going to share it with the outside world, it just means if it didn't leave the organisation, you're not going to be embarrassed. So anything public can be read by anyone in your business without issue. Private. So you tag a file as private if it's something you don't really want to leave the organisation. If it did, it might cause some embarrassment. And last one is confidential. Flagging the file as confidential might be an HR document. Now, the reason you have these IRM or information rights management tags is it effectively encrypts the document using the IRM toolset, which is a standard these days. And if that file leaves the business, so if an employee leaves, they'll lose access to that file. Even if they put it on their local USB drive and still on their computer at home, they will no longer be able to open that file. If you email it outside the business, somebody tries to open it, they won't be able to unless they have a valid user account within your business. So IRM adds that extra layer of control to say, even if a document leaves my organisation, it can't be read. And then you can add on top of that rules to say if you want to make it a public document, audit log, tag this document as public so I can share it outside the business, and again to put those controls in place.
I did hear some things around, can you stop things like printing a document as well?
You can, if you go to the real extreme, the completely sensitive, you can stop screenshots. You can't stop somebody getting out their phone and taking a photo of the monitor, but you can stop the clipping tool, you can stop screenshots, you can stop the ability to print a document. So if you really want to turn IRM on to the full extent, you can flag a document to not even out of that. So it can be very powerful, but again, keep it simple because otherwise people will work around it.
Okay, so we've assessed our data and we've worked out where we're going, our logical state, and then we've secured it. Anything else left?
Data lifecycle is a really important one. Unfortunately, the tools in this space aren't quite as mature as the first sort of 4 tools we talked about today. But the idea is that you have this data rot. We all accumulate over years. I said we've got health and safety policies that are 10, 20 years old. We all have them, and we don't like to delete them because it's like I spend hours doing that. I want to keep it. It's like a hoarder. So you do that. What you can do is you can tag those documents in the same way. So you can identify older obsolete data by things like, when was it last accessed? How old is that document? Who was the last person to access it? But then also, as you create a document, tag a label to it to say this is a 7-year file or a 3-year file or a 1-year file. You can also do things like if it's an HR file, tag it to automatically destroy 2 years after the employee leaves. So you can do some pretty smart things. Usually you wouldn't do that. What you might do is say, tag to archive 2 years after they leave, or tag for review. So what will happen is reports will come up saying, these are the documents that are now 7 years old. Do you want to keep them, review them, archive them, destroy them? And building that data lifecycle management. And now, it's not going to be overnight. You're not suddenly going to find all your data rot is gone. But over time, as that progresses through, as time goes by, you'll find less and less of that old data is there. Again, don't necessarily delete it, put it in the archive where things like Copilot won't use it. And therefore, you've got better and better data over time. So it's just a slow process of going through and tagging that data, reviewing that data, and moving it out of the system.
So I think it's quite good that you mentioned these tools, because to me, if you had to try to do this manually, it would be time consuming, wouldn't it? Almost like your employee, but it sounds like there's a lot of rules that you can put in place to help with that.
Yeah, there is. And you hear, I know organisations such as FMG and big enterprises, they have 2, 3, 4, 5 data compliance officers, and their job full time is to do data compliance.
Wow.
So it can become a really, really, really big project, and small businesses just can't do that and shouldn't do that, because everything has cost and value, and you want to make sure you maximise that value while minimising your cost. So there are tools to help. Those tools are getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those tools are better than others. Like I said, information rights management, data leak prevention, those tools have been around for some time and are very good now. Data lifecycle management is still in its infancy from a small business point of view. Hence why, again, it's one of the 5 steps. We say don't rush into that, because the technology is going to get better. And you're going to find there's those same AI tools that we're using to do a smarter job are also going to get better at helping to reduce your data rot over time as the tools get developed. So yes, there are tools for that. It can become a really big project. Our aim is to keep it really, really small, make it bite-sized. Every step you take can be done individually, and also every step will reduce your risk slightly and improve the value of the data slightly. It's just that micro steps.
Excellent. So now you mentioned tagging your data, sensitive, public, private, etc. So is there anything else that we can do? I mean, because the tagging sounds quite a useful tool.
So this taxonomy of meta tags got a whole lot of media attention about 5 or 10 years ago. I lose track of time, so I can't really remember. But around the time there was a big spy saga about people reading and listening to your phone calls. And the spy agency stood up and said, no, we don't listen to your phone calls, we track meta tags. So we track the length of the phone call, we track who you called, we track when you called them. But no, we don't listen to your phone calls. The meta tags got a bit of a bad rap for a while there. But the idea with meta tags is you're just helping these tools out. You're building a taxonomy which states what sort of data am I storing, and can I tag it in any way to help something in the future. So for instance, we build a lot of these. We build presentations, and in 4 years' time, I built this presentation, or Alice did, because Alice is our marketing genius. I'd love that document. Where is it? And I can't remember what it was called. Can't remember what the subject was, but I know it looked good. Where can I find it? So you tag it. So one of the tags we use internally is marketing brochures. We tag marketing information. The system as a marketing document. We tag quotes. We tag policies and processes. And then I can say to the search system, show me all marketing brochures, show me all policies, show me all processes. It means you can more easily find them. It means your team is more productive. It means that when AI and Copilot start rolling to the top, it's got more data and more access, so it's going to give you better results. So over time, again, it's that slow incremental process. You attach that data, and it'll just become more useful to you. It does require a little bit of effort up front to go, what's our best taxonomy structure? You can't just put everything in there. You've got to keep it simple, but it does get better over time. And then you've got to train your staff, and that's part of the change management process.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's to me a good journey, and it takes you to that place and to make it more useful. So I've got a few questions still, but I might ask the attendees, if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to ask. And we've also got a quick survey form there, so feel free to get your camera out and scan the QR code. We'd love to know what you'd like us to talk about next time. So just while waiting on those questions, so one of them for me is around, you alluded to it, Heather, around the people and getting them on board. How do we make sure that happens? Because I have talked with other businesses where they've started this journey and then over time everybody's gone back to their old ways. So
I think the people are almost the hardest aspect of this. Like it's easy to fix technology, it's easy to roll out a tool. Probably not easy, but easy to roll out a tool and follow processes. But the people aspect make things more of a challenge. So it's really important that when you're looking at that data governance journey, you look at the change management across it as well. And one of those is about getting your people on board early on, so they understand why you're doing it. That's really, really important. They understand whether there's a burning bridge you're standing on or whether there's a benefit to them. Because it's going to require change for them. It's probably going to require a little bit more work, or at least they'll feel like it's more work. So they need to understand upfront what it means for them and why you're doing it. They understand the risk and what the benefit they might get out of it. They're more likely to go, okay, I'm up for adding a meta tag. I'm up for making sure I check which folder I'm saving. So whatever it might be, but it's making sure they're part of the journey right at the start so they understand it. So it's not just, oh man, now I have to do this. Oh, why are they asking me to do that? Got to bring them from the start, and then it'll be part of their day.
It's also why we made this journey quite gradual. Now, when you first start, you say, okay, my job today is only tag data if it's public, private, or confidential. That's easy. It's built into Word, Excel. It's built into the application. When we turn it on, that's all they need to do. It's one more step. It's not hard. In 3 months' time, 6 months' time, okay, now we're going to roll on the data lifecycle request. We're just going to ask you a data lifecycle question. And then you get that, and you get that embedded. And you do the next one, which is your taxonomy going. And each step, it's not a big job. You're not saying, let's go from doing nothing to doing 300 things all at once. It's just one or two small things every 3 to 6 months or every 12 months and slowly work through it.
Yeah, because that was going to be my other question was, is this going to be a lot of work for me? You know, if I save the file, I need to tick all these things, but I mean, that sounds great. Just start with one or two, get used to it.
You can force it. You know, that comes back to your shadow IT. We can say, right, you cannot save a document without doing information rights management. You cannot save a document without doing data lifecycle management, and you cannot save a document in the system without doing the taxonomy. So we can turn the system on and say, you cannot do this. Then we come back to our first conversation, which is, then they'll find a way to work around it. They'll go, cool, I'm just going to put it on this USB key because I don't get asked all these silly questions.
And so, in time, is this we need to go back and review to make sure that everybody is? I mean, we've got the tools there that can tell us some stuff. What's the time period you'd expect a company to go back and have a look? Is it a yearly review?
I think it changes depending on your plan and how quickly you roll out the journey. So whether it is a yearly thing to go back and review your files and your documents and your structure, probably is at least a yearly thing to do some kind of audit and review. You can identify that as part of like your governance work and your policy of every year our risk committee is going to do a review and audit. It's also something that you need to keep reviewing in the sense of, do you have your metadata right? Do you have your tags right? Do you have your rules in place that are right? Are you making life too difficult for people, or is stuff at risk of getting out that you have a plan for? So it's a review of whether you've got the right stuff in place. And also the industry and the world changes, so you want to keep reviewing along the way.
And it would depend business to business.
Yeah.
I imagine what is the culture there like and so on. So
And you, as we talk about the data lifecycle management and the data leak prevention, there's reporting tools you can put over the top and getting the system set up so those reports come through and those reports are reviewed. You know, who am I sharing data with currently? Who am I sharing data I shouldn't be? What sensitive data is in the system? Am I detecting it? What information is coming up for you in the next 6 months from the data lifecycle point of view? So having those reporting systems in place that allow you to sit down and go through, right, my report's telling me I've got 5,000 passport numbers in the system. Are they in a place where they're safe? The report's telling me I've got 200 documents that are due for destruction next 12 months. Who's going to review those and are those the quick cursory glance, or is there something more to it than that? So having that process in place that a report comes through and you can work through it.
This is probably a tricky question for you as well, because it will depend on the size of the businesses. But stage one, assessing somebody's data, what's a comfortable time period, I guess, for that? And is there a lot of impact to the business? Like, do they need to give a lot of time to it? Or do you manage it for them?
A little bit of both. It depends a little bit on how many data silos are we talking. Are we looking at Dropbox, Google Drive, SharePoint, OneDrive, Xero? How many different systems are we auditing? There are tools out there. We're working with a couple of vendors now on tools that are there to scan and find and report. So we can do a data assessment and say, let's look at the current state and automate as much as possible. So ideally, we can roll out a data assessment and just come back to a report of here's what we found. But we can't escape the fact there's going to need to be some interviews in there somewhere to say, tell me how you work. No, don't tell me how you are meant to work. Tell me how you actually work. Because often those are two different things.
I can definitely see the importance from, as I say, the day-to-day working for people and how it feeds into other aspects of this. Do you have any questions up on your?
No, none have popped up here. If anyone has any questions, don't be afraid to pop them in the chat.
Or if you do like, in their feedback form, you can put a question in there as well, and we can come back to you and answer that as well. But if there's no other questions, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming along, and we'll let you know what the next webinar will be, and love to get some suggestions in the feedback form about what you'd like to hear about as well.
So we were still talking about an Excel deep dive at some point.
Yes.
Excel Copilot deep dive. But obviously we do want to start running these webinars more often, and go from there.
What protocols?
We've got Simon Barnes. Morning, Simon. What protocols around voice video recordings? We use a recording to run through an AI tool to produce minutes. How can we protect the original data from future misuse? How does the client gain comfort from our use of the data? It's the same rules as information rights management. So if you're using Teams to record that, the transcription gets put into the system, the audio file gets put into the system. Where's that being stored? Have you got a life cycle around that? So automatically in Teams, when you record a message, this video recording will get deleted or maybe in 90 days. Now, we need to move it somewhere else to stop that. So when we do move it, we want to make sure we move it to a location that's secure. There's version history. We can see what's going on in the audit logs. So out of the box, this will get this, in 30 seconds, this message will explode type scenario. That's built in, and then move it somewhere where it is safe. So put those controls in place.
And I think just a reminder that if you do have the Copilot license, it is keeping it within your tenant. So they're not sharing your meeting minutes back with Microsoft. So you've got that security as well. And also when you do record your meeting minutes, a pop-up pops up in your Teams meeting to say, Simon Barnes has started recording this. So you're letting everybody in the meeting know as well. And if somebody didn't want to have theirs recorded, they could opt out of the meeting.
So, and as you just said, the privacy policy there, make sure you've got that privacy policy document to match your business. Make sure it's on your website. Make sure all that information is there so every single person dealing with your business is fully aware how you use data and that you've got controls in place to do what you say you do.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again at our next webinar.
Thank you very much.